service. And then traits over here. Now this one is where it gets kind of complicated potentially, because some of these don't even apply to this particular view, but it says list the traits to give this data item, which is, that's such a generic way to list it, but for actors, so let me see if it says anything different for up here. No, okay. So what you do in here is there's certain things you can use, and I'm just going to double click on it, and this gets really in depth here, so we'll just go over it a little bit here. So we have a bunch of different tabs here: rates, parameters, attacks, skills, equipment, and then other things on top of those. So here we have element rate, debuff rate, state resist. So pretty much what you can do: parameters, different parameters, EX parameters, SP parameters, attack elements, attack states. So we'll just go through these a little bit. But what this does is it lets you set certain things about this character that may not be the defaults for every other character. So, if you want to say, for example, with this element rate, it says changes the damage multiplier according to the specified element. The higher the value, the greater the weakness against the element. So for example, physical counts as an element. So if you just click this drop down box here, it says physical, fire, ice, thunder, water, earth, wind, light, and darkness. These are all the default elements in the game that are used for different attacks. So maybe you want this character to have, fire attacks of 105% or something. So here's where you would change that and set that up, and that would apply just to this character. And I'll just hit OK just for example, and you can see element rate fire times 105%. So it would be 5% stronger than normal or whatever. I'm just going to right click and delete that just for, because I don't actually, not actually going to set anything here, but just to show you, for example. So, and you can do that with physical attacks, thunder attacks, whatever. So debuff rate, we'll just look at all these briefly. It says changes the probability at which the use of a skill or item will succeed in debuffing a parameter. So, you can set these for your character's stats and things, the max health and the max magic and attack, defense, things like that, agility, luck. And you can, again, change the values here. So if you want them to be, maybe less lucky, you could do that, and then pull this number back down a little bit or whatever you want to do. So state rate, this says, let's see, changes the probability at which the use of a skill or item will succeed in applying a state. Now see, this is one where it doesn't really apply to this character actor section, I don't think. I could be wrong about that, but the way it's worded, it seems like it would be useful to use on a skill or an item, but like putting it here, I don't know that's going to do anything. So that's what's kind of weird about these. I feel like it's something that they just kind of put together as like a catch-all in one place, but it doesn't always apply to every place that you can access this. So it's kind of strange, but anyway, the point of this here is just that, you could have certain things be like, poison rate of, maybe they're resistant to poison, so only 50% of the time, you can actually type in here with your keyboard too, and you don't have to use the arrows again. But it's that sort of a thing where you can mess with that a little bit. But again, I don't know that it's even going to do anything in here. What it might do, just what I'm thinking, like if you do use it here and it does work here, then it might just be like an inherent ability of this character that stays no matter what. Doesn't depend on their equipment or anything like that, where it's just they're 50% more resistant to poison than attacks or whatever than other characters. So it may function that way. Again, this is one of those areas where I'm a little bit, sketchy on it. I haven't really done much with it, so it's probably one of those things you want to test and trial and error. Which, speaking of that, that's probably a good way to test a lot of these things. Is really just testing them out and seeing for yourself what changes. So if you want to say, okay, well, what does this look like at 50% when I use a poison attack? Or, okay, what does it look like at 150%? And you can just kind of do that a little bit. Just play around with a setting that you're, not really familiar with, and you just want to see what it does, just kind of experimenting. And and there's a whole test mode. We'll get into that when we get into enemies and troops. There's a whole test battle mode that you can go into quickly to just see how a encounter would work out without having to worry about jumping into the game and everything. And that's a good way to test things like this, where you want to see, like, okay, maybe 150 was too much, but maybe I want it to be 130, and you can fine-tune stuff like that too. It's just by going in and fiddling with stuff there. And so here we have state resist, kind of like state rate, except the opposite, pretty much. It says completely. Oh, okay, never mind. It completely negates a state. So that would be like if there was a 0% chance, which I imagine you could set up in here as well if you wanted. But it says completely negates a state. If knockouts are negated, characters will not be knocked out even when their HP falls to 0. So knockout is basically the the KO, the death, the whatever you want to call it, the faint, the fainting status, whatever. And basically, when your character reaches 0 health, then so if you had it like that for knockout in this case, I'm not sure why you would want to do it that way, but I'm not sure what the benefit would be for doing that, but maybe you could come up with something creative. But basically, they wouldn't be able to die in battle, it seems like. So yeah, I'm not really sure. But you don't have to do that. You can do, these other things like poison, for example. Like, it's completely immune to poison, or, completely immune to confusion status, or whatever. Things like that. So that's what you can use that for. So let's just go on to the next section here, the parameter section. So the parameters, it says the rate of change for the specified parameters. So here, if you wanted to mess with certain things, like, I want their attack to be, maybe it's weaker than normal, maybe it's like 95%, or that sort of thing. So here again, it's related to the character's stats, and you can mess with those as needed. You might be something you want to fiddle with for your own game a little bit. And then next we have the EX parameter. It says value added to the specified EX parameter. The default value is 0. So EX parameters are these specific things here: hit rate, evasion rate, critical evasion, magic reflection, counterattack, HP, MP, and TP regeneration. So it's pretty much the same thing. It's just if you want to change these different stats, like you want maybe the critical rate to go up for like an extra 5% critical rate chance, or whatever. Again, this is a lot of stuff that you really got to dig down into, all the stats and everything. And if you're going to make a game that's really complex and has a lot of stuff for its battle systems, and you really want to drill down into this stuff, it's all here for you to experiment with, and you'll come to understand a little bit better about what everything does. And then I can explain, because I don't have a ton of experience with doing this sort of stuff. I usually use a lot of the defaults that are set in place, because for balance purposes and things. Because one of the things I've learned is that it's really difficult to balance a game when you start fiddling with these things without like a really strong understanding of them, because you can easily like imbalance encounters and things like that. So it takes a lot to really dive deep into this stuff, or you can just leave everything at the defaults and keep it simple too. You don't have to really fiddle with these things. So that's kind of nice, but it's there if you want it. If you want to dive deep and really get into battles and make them super tailored to exactly how you want it, then you've got a lot of control here. And then likewise for the EX parameters, we have the SP parameters, and it just says the rate of change for the specified SP parameter. The default value is 100%. So here we have target rate, guard effect, recovery effect, pharmacology, that's a fancy one, MP cost rate, TP charge rate, physical damage, magical damage, floor damage, and experience. So you can even change the rate of experience in this section here, experience gain. And floor damage, that's kind of an interesting one. So if they have a resistance to lava floors or something, or poison floors, or whatever you want to use, you can modify that. Or maybe it's a susceptibility instead of a resistance. Anyway, point being, you've got a lot of control in here too that you can, mess around with. Now the attack tab here, This one is kind of cool. This is one I have used before. So it says attack element, says normal attack element. So when you use just a normal attack in the battle system, by default it's a physical attack, but you can change this here again to this list of elements. So you could have this character Harold, say for example, all his normal attacks are earth element. And that's how you would set that up here. It doesn't matter what weapon they use or class that they are. Like by this character is always going to attack earth element attacks with, you know, their default attack ability. So and this is how you could set up things like, you know, if you wanted a character that's elemental based or whatever, and you wanted your battles to be really particular about what elements that you use, you know, some counter others and that sort of thing, you could set this up pretty easily using this attack element thing. Attack state is pretty similar, but instead of elements, it says state applied as an additional effect of a normal attack. So, and if you wanted, I haven't explained this yet, but if you wanted to do multiple things, so you say, okay, I want the Herald's attack element to be Earth, so I'll hit OK. And then that lists us here, and then all you would do is right click and do edit, or you can just double click on a blank space, either way. And then you go back in there and you say, oh, I want their attack state to be, you know, we can add, you know, blindness with a 50% chance or something. Then this is all you would do. You just add it to the list, and now Harold's attack element is always Earth, and then his attacks have a 50% chance to blind enemies, and then you would just keep going and adding more states to the list, and on it goes. So that's how you add multiple traits, and you can have a bunch going down here down the list too. So so attack states lets you add, you know, certain effects, and you can do some pretty cool stuff. You can do knockout, so that would be like they have a % chance to always defeat an enemy in one attack, regardless of how much damage it did. That's a pretty cool one you can fiddle with. Guard is kind of an interesting one. I'm not really sure what the benefit of that would be, because guard is like defending and making it so, you know, they take less damage. So it's like you would have a % chance of doing less damage than normal, I guess, if you did that. But I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess you can think of something to do with that, but by default, that wouldn't be a super helpful one. Same with the mortal, like that. That would be a risky one. Like you have a % chance to have it so your enemies would not be able to die from your attacks at all if it triggered. So that, yeah, I don't know. That would be some interesting systems to see people, you know, put those to use in some creative way. But typically things like this: poison, blindness, silence, rage, confusion, fascination. I'm not sure what that one is by default, but and sleep, things like that, statuses like that. You can apply them and then have a % chance. If you want it to always do it, then you do 100%. You know, if you want it to do it, you know, half the time, it's 50%, so on and so forth. So attack speed is the next thing here, and it says value that is added to agility when determining attack order when a normal attack has been selected. So this is basically just a thing to, like, if you wanted an extra fast character that would potentially be faster than certain enemies, you know, on the attack priority, then you could fiddle with this here. Normally, though, you just kind of determine that by the stats that we'll see in the classes here, like the agility stat and things like that. So I'm not sure that this would be a super useful one, but I'm sure there's some uses that I don't realize for it that would be, you know, appealing to put together. There's sort of like a attack priority kind of thing. Like they'll always have attack priority no matter what, or, you know, that kind of thing. And then likewise here, attack times, this one is actually pretty cool, but it could get pretty unbalanced and pretty quick if you go too crazy with it. But it says increases the number of times a normal attack hits a target. Entering +1 means 2 consecutive attacks. So by 0, by default, that means you just get a normal single attack like you do. But if you start doing, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, then they'll potentially attack multiple times. So if you wanted them to do 2 hits with every attack, then it would be, you know, +1 on top of their normal attack, that sort of thing.